Welcome to our discussion today. My guest is Judson Walker, the Director of Systems Engineering for Brocade. Judson, thanks for joining us.
How you doing, Jason?
We're going to talk about how federal agencies and other organizations can improve their security of their networks and modernize them at the same time. We know the internet is getting more complex. We know there's more devices that have come on board, so to speak. We know that threats are evolving. We know that organizations, networks, applications, data also are evolving, and we're seeing this uptick of something called ransomware. Now, this is leading to a lot of uncertainty for users, executives, how best to secure those networks and data. At the same time, agencies are struggling with outdated technology, and that poses a bigger risk. They can't get out of this circle of spending on legacy systems. So that's where you come in, Judson. You're going to talk to us about how they're going to break that cycle. We're going to modernize and improve cybersecurity all at once. So let's start at the beginning, if you will. The biggest problem agencies are facing today when it comes to network modernization and cybersecurity is, you fill out the answer to that one.
Sure, Jason. We Brocade recently did a market survey where we talked to 200 individuals, government personnel across 60 different agencies. And really the top two drivers is related to, number one, the migration to the cloud. Every agency seems to be moving to the cloud in some form or fashion, private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud. So as this data moves into that new paradigm, what new vulnerabilities from a cybersecurity standpoint is going to pop up that we need to address? Number two is the evolution of the Internet of Things, or IoT. Where 20 years ago, when infrastructures that we deploy today were first architected and built, there was roughly around 100 million devices. We're north of 3 to 4 billion today, with expectation numbers up in the 20 billion number in 2020. So when we start looking at so many devices, so geographically dispersed, each one of those devices opens up a potential security vulnerability that these agencies need to address. So the question is, how do I streamline that security paradigm, and also how do I adjust to scale, as we know these numbers are growing exponentially?
I think there's two keys here: adjust and to scale. I think that's huge because, as you said, the Internet of Things or networked devices, whatever we're going to call it nowadays, is the growth of that is not going to stop. And we see it with medical devices. We're going to see it with just sensors. And I always love to talk about, your toaster could be a cybersecurity hazard, right? And then the other piece of this is the cloud, and there's a lot of uncertainty around cloud. So talk a little bit about how to embrace this future. How do agencies move forward?
Well, first of all, it's we need to talk about it up front. And solutions need to be built in versus bolted on from a cybersecurity standpoint. I always coin the term IoT as Internet of Things, but it's also the Internet of Threats. And so with that, there's got to be a sense of awareness right up front. So as you start looking at developing a security solution, agencies need to focus on a security strategy. And that strategy needs to start from the device, whatever that device may be, cell phones, PDAs, sensors, etc., all the way to the data center where that data may reside and be housed. And along that line, there's going to be a set of security parameters, techniques that need to be put in play to secure the infrastructure effectively. So it's a collaborative conversation. So again, as I mentioned, built in versus bolted on. Bring all the security experts along with network architects, application developers, should all be in the same room together to start this collaboration as this new modernization effort takes place.
There's one thing about this that I think people who are listening will say, well, I can't be responsible for devices. My Apple iPhone, my Android device, I can't secure that. I can put a password in. But really what you're talking about is not necessarily the device side. And we've been talking about this, I think, for several years now, maybe more than a decade. It's really all about going back to the data, how to secure the data. And that's where things like encryption come in and other security tools and techniques. And in that market connection survey that you talked about, what was interesting to me was how much people were kind of unsure what encryption was and then also how to use it. So talk a little bit about what you found first, and then we'll kind of go down the path of how to apply them.
Sure. As part of that survey, one of the top three challenges associated with encrypting the government networks today has been, hey, we want to use encryption, specifically encryption in flight, but when we deploy an encryption service, we take a large or huge performance hit as far as delivering of the service to their user community. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I've got aid to deliver the services to my user community so they like what they see or hear or visualize. But at the same time, I need to secure that environment. In a lot of cases, IT professionals remove the security aspects of this configuration or design for the promotion of the service, of the delivery of the service. So what we believe we can bring to the table today is to deliver high performance encryption in flight line rate solutions that can now be applied at the same time, so you can deliver the services that I need, but also provide a high level of encryption at the exact same time.
And I think that goes back to your earlier comment saying bring in the security folks, the network architects, everyone in the same room, the mission folks, because I think what the mission folks have to come to a realization is that I can deliver to my users and my customers in a high-performing way that is something that is secure. And you're right, I think most people will give up security, unfortunately, for better performance. I think we see that in personal lives, and I think we see that in the business world. So how do you do that? How do you get that message across?
Well, first of all, as we talk about securing from the device to the data center, we talk about the normalization of the hardware. To your point, PDA, cell phones are commonality now. So they're normalized devices. But what we can now do as we look at data transit from those devices back into the enterprise is being able to look at individual security point products and see where they fit in the architecture, and then provide a level of collaboration as far as how that data is supporting those models. So for example, encryption in flight. I can now provide encryption in flight services down to the individual device and providing a high performance, high rate service back to the headquarters location. So what do I now deliver? I deliver scale in supporting the IoT initiatives. I provide encryption strength. And I'm now aligning myself with a lot of the new government frameworks that exist today. For example, the CSFC program coming out of the Fort, or NSA, which is the Commercial Solutions for Classified Deployment. It's what CSFC stands for. And what it delivers is not product, but a framework that any agency can adopt. And then they can leverage their industry partners to acquire product that align with that strategy. And I think that's a great logical step for government organizations to build a more common environment, especially as we look at sharing information interagency and intra-agency.
So let's just tag back to the CSFC for a second. It was a mouthful, first of all, so we got to get a better acronym, right?
Right, exactly.
But tell me a little bit more about that framework, maybe for people who aren't maybe familiar with it.
Sure. So the CSFC was developed about 4 years ago. And really the baseline behind the framework is to provide a blueprint for an agency to follow as far as deploying a classified solution as far as encryption services within their enterprise. So it actually creates the framework for what it looks like, black box A, black box B, and how it's connected. But in addition to that, it also talks about how encryption strength and what it should look like, what algorithms to use, and how to configure those algorithms. And then the final piece, which I think is most important, it also gives an a la carte menu of industry partners that have already been vetted that aligns with the policies that are defined within the CSFC capabilities package or framework. So what that gives the user community, the agencies, is really a framework to start. The architects can look at very easily, and then they can pick and choose through this a la carte menu of what makes best sense for them based on their enterprise.
That's very helpful because I think, even though, as you said, it's 4 years old, I'm not sure how much people have talked about it, how much there's a lot of interest in it. And it's also interesting that you talked about kind of an approved products list, if you will. I think that's key to getting something off the ground. Let's talk more broadly about encryption. You're saying encryption in flight at a scale aligned with the framework. How do agencies go down that path? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of people recognize the value of encryption, but well, where do I start? What do I start with? What are you seeing, maybe Brocade seeing from its customers?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is, in a lot of cases, current encryption solutions are very software driven, where they are relying on a central computer or CPU to provide that service. Obviously, there's a limit there when it comes to performance. So what we are recommending and what we're delivering within Brocade's portfolio is a very hardware-centric implementation. So the encryption process is actually done at the hardware/chip level. So we can then deliver those services efficiently without compromising data transit, degradation and performance, because again, that encryption process is actually done at the hardware level.
And for people who maybe, again, just to simplify it a little bit, at the hardware level, meaning your data resides on a server and the encryption is being done before it goes in transit, versus other people may have their data is encrypted in transit, which then, again, as you said, slows down the performance. Correct. Is that the difference?
That is the difference, yes, sir.
And do people, when they move toward that change, what has to happen to their networks? Because, again, part of this discussion is not just cybersecurity, but it's also modernization. Yes. Do current setup of networks can handle that change of moving from the software side to the hardware side?
The capability is there, Jason. I think it really starts with, one, Looking at your enterprise and delivering a standards-based set of implementations as part of your modernization plan. So you've got a set of protocols and a set of frameworks that you kind of build your models around. Number two is to, once you define that model, reach out to your industry partners and let them provide you solutions that align with the models you've constructed and a set of attributes that you believe are necessary to deliver a true end-to-end strategy of securing your enterprise effectively. That may include short-term technologies like encryption in flight, and then it will be evolving into more software-centric implementations like software-defined networking as it pertains to cybersecurity.
For the most part, and again, every agency is a little different. You're feeling from working with different federal agencies, they're ready to do this today. There's not a big buy they have to make. They don't have to set a new data center up. I mean, this is something that can happen today if they wanted to, in many regards.
Yes, the technology is there. It's just all about understanding what you want to do with the technology. I think what's been challenging is we have the tendency to react based on the problems that come up. And we're more reactive versus proactive. This is an opportunity to be very proactive using technologies that actually have been around for a few years now. So it's not like you're looking at bleeding edge technology to do that migration.
And I think that's key. People are comfortable with what kind of technology this is. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion, Security and Network Modernization, sponsored by Brocade on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.